Reboots, revivals, revival movies. Y'all know the drill. For one reason or another, this is the big thing in Hollywood right now. It seems like everybody is getting a second chance. Some are even getting third chances, whether they deserve it or not. I don't need to go into detail about this. You guys are seeing it every single day firsthand. And one of the most recent shows to make a comeback this year is the classic Nickelodeon sitcom Zoey 101. That's right, a revival movie that reunites most of the original cast is available for streaming on the service Paramount Plus. But as we have seen with the revivals recently, it's really a game of hit or miss. iCarly seems to be doing pretty well with their revival. Fairly Odd Parents? Not so much. So that's really what today's video would be about. We will be discussing the Zoey 101 revival film and where it ranks in terms of sitcom revivals of the modern era, while also discussing reboots as a whole and what the future lies ahead for them, because we are certainly living in interesting times. So let me just start off by saying that growing up, I was not the biggest fan of Zoey 101, admittedly. I remember it used to always come on after Declassified, and I would always turn the channel whenever I heard the "Are you ready?" in the intro. Clearly I wasn't ready, I guess. But as time went on, I randomly just decided to start watching some of the reruns on Teen Nick, and because of this, I think I've seen about 75 to 80% of this series. And I mean, it's not a bad show at all. It's not one of my favorite Nick series, but I'd call it pretty high quality kids entertainment, and I do kind of mean that literally because apparently it was Nickelodeon's most expensive series at the time, and you could totally tell by how the show was filmed. Despite not seeing every single episode, I am very much up to date with all of the important plot points of the series that are necessary to know for this film. Chase had a crush on Zoey for a while. Zoey kind of sort of liked him back. Zoey moved to London and overheard Chase talking about how he felt about her. So she moved back to PCA, but Chase didn't know she was going to do that, so he moved to London and was kind of just stuck there for a while. Meanwhile, Elvis took Chase's spot in the series for the last season, filling in as both roommate to Michael and Logan and love interest to Zoey, but they break up in the same episode that Chase makes his comeback in, and so the series ends with Chase and Zoey as a couple. Simultaneously, Logan and Quinn, who spent most of the series bickering, end up dating as well. A storyline used so commonly in Dan Schneider shows, it's a miracle that Jada and Robbie didn't end up as a couple. There were also some other things that happened in real life after the series ended that led to its revival happening. There was this weird 10th anniversary short acknowledging this one episode of the series where Zoey put a DVD in a time capsule with a secret message in it. Michael tells Chase that in the video, Zoey suspected that Chase had a crush on her at the time, even before she went to England. She even thought about getting together with him, but didn't act on it until after she went to England. Then it kind of just leaves off on a cliffhanger. A few years later, some of the cast members reunited on the All That reboot. The only reason why this happened is because I think the All That reboot writers thought that people actually remembered that Jamie Lynn Spears was on the original show, but I can assure you most people only know her from Zoey 101. Once Amanda and Josh left, nobody was watching All That. Then there was this really weird online reunion thing that had all of these TikTokers and some of the original cast members back. I still don't really know what this was, but yeah, it existed. And so now we're finally here at the movie. It's obvious that this was something that was brewing for a while and it finally dropped. We all kind of expected it to happen at some point, right? Well, now that it's here, it's time we actually start talking about the movie itself. By the way, this will be a non-spoiler review in case you wanted to watch it on your own. It's a pretty new movie after all, so I'd like to give you guys the opportunity to experience it without knowing what happens. Zoey 102 takes place roughly 14 years after the show ended. The film centers around Zoe Brooks, who is now the only female producer on a reality dating show called Love Fully Charged. Most of the movie deals with Zoe's struggles with seeing her old friends from high school living much more lavish and joy-filled lives that she has no part of because of her busy work schedule. Allegedly, at least. There's this one scene where Zoey scrolls through her friends' social media pages, and we get to see what some of them have been up to since the show ended. Michael, who was my favorite character on the show, is now a successful music producer. Chase is a teacher in a supposedly happy relationship, and Stacy is the host of a true crime podcast with help from her now husband, Mark. Oh yeah, I forgot they get together in the finale. The interesting thing about Stacy is that her lisp is gone for the entire film, which adds up with the finale of the series. The only issue is, though, Stacy has made appearances in other shows set in the Schneiderverse, where it's shown that her lisp came back. So either it just comes and goes or the writers fumbled with that one. Although, to be fair, I don't blame them for not being caught up on their iCarly and Sam and Cat lore. The most important thing we learned though is that Quinn is the CEO of a successful tech company that makes fancy, indestructible phones, and Logan helps run the company. Oh yeah, and they're also getting married. As for characters that aren't included in this movie, we get a brief explanation that Dustin is married and has a couple of kids with more on the way, but they never really acknowledge the whereabouts of anyone else, which is kind of funny because during the montage, we have to just kind of pretend Mark and Stacy were actually main characters in the show, but in all actuality, they're only big time players in this movie because the rest of the cast members didn't want to be in it for one reason or another. Speaking of the rest of the cast members, and this really shouldn't be a spoiler because it was kind of obvious, there are no appearances by Victoria Justice, Alexa Nicholas, Austin Butler, or Kristen Herrera. Nor do we find out what any of those characters are up to, and honestly, although we know what happened behind the scenes with some of those people, it is kind of realistic that some people just fell out of touch with their high school friend group, so it really wasn't that weird. In real life, Paul Butcher developed some sort of issue with Jamie Lynn Spears, posting this savage TikTok when the reboot was announced saying that nobody actually wanted the show to come back. I don't actually think Victoria Justice or Kristen Herrera have any issues with the movie's cast though. They've both been seen with the rest of the cast in various events. But of course, the situation with Alexa Nicholas was one of the biggest stories surrounding this movie, with some people even choosing to not watch it due to how she was treated during production of the original show, and I fully get it. Another major conflict of the movie is that Zoey still somehow hasn't gotten over Chase, as we find out that the two were supposed to go to Hawaii together after they graduated, but Zoey never showed up, which has led to sourness and radio silence between them. But the problem is, Chase is Logan's best man and Zoey is Quinn's maid of honor, so they'll be forced to interact with each other at some point during the wedding. I was kind of confused that Chase ended up being Logan's best man because I felt like throughout the series he was closer to Michael, but Michael is the one that's actually marrying them, so makes sense. Zoey overhears that Chase is in a relationship, so she hires an actor to play her fake boyfriend from Australia. A plot that would have worked great if these characters were still 14. And if things weren't chaotic enough, Zoey also has to juggle Quinn's wedding with handling the live taping of her reality show. Do things go wrong? I won't spoil it, but you know how these things go. The rest of the movie kind of just rehashes the biggest ongoing storyline from the TV show, which was will Zoey and Chase get together? But they did get together. They had a happy ending. Why undo that just for the sake of another story? Oh, I know. Money! But still, with the way Zoey 101 ended, there wasn't really anything else that I needed to know about these characters. Almost everyone had pretty concrete endings. I don't need an extra hour-and-a-half long movie confirming these things that we already saw happen. And then, for the sake of making a quick buck, they just reversed some of the character development that we saw. Just leave it alone. We didn't want this. I say we like I actually cared about the show as a kid, but you get what I mean. That's my biggest issue with this movie, is that it's really just unnecessary. The show was about their lives in high school and everything that they were doing in their pastime, and the finale wrapped most of these things up. What other stories can you even tell from that? And then really, we spend so much time focusing on Zoey's miserable life, but all of this is kind of her fault for not letting go of the past and stop obsessing over Chase. It's been years. Let it go. Move on. Be an adult. They spent all this time focusing on someone whose main issue could easily be solved if they just moved on. Zoey's character is unlikable, which leads to her entire subplot being unlikable, which leads to a good portion of the movie being unlikable. The movie is also lacking that charm that Zoey 101 had once upon a time. And I think it's mainly because, the cast is just old now. Seriously, they are. And it's not solely about the age, don't get me wrong. It's also because they still write some of these characters like they're teenagers. They're still doing this whole will they, won't they thing with Zoey and Chase, and it's just they already did when they were 14 years younger. Why keep doing this? As for the rest of the movie, there's nothing really special about it. You could have used this exact same script, change all the names and call it I don't know, Not So Perfect High School Reunion, and it would still work. And it would still be trash, too, respectfully. Nah, disrespectfully, I don't even care anymore. I don't think it's one of the worst films I've ever seen, but it's definitely one of the most useless. It truly did not need to exist. As far as I know, everyone was okay with how the show ended. It feels like a regular, mediocre, low-budget rom-com you'd find airing on ABC Family at 3 a.m. in 2011, but with the characters of Zoey 101. It doesn't feel like a Zoey 101 movie. Matter of fact, there are times where I kinda just forgot it was. Well, there was one scene that reminded me this was based on a Dan Schneider show.
Can you take a look at my feet?
But yeah, this movie was a soulless cash grab with little redeeming qualities. It didn't expand on anything from the original series in any meaningful way that would justify doing this movie. And overall, I feel like if you watch any rom-com from like the mid-2000s, you'll get most of the same stuff. The movie is at its best when Michael, Logan, and Quinn are on the screen, but whenever they focus on Zoey and Chase, it dips hard. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 10. I'd say it could have been better, but I honestly don't know if that's true. But I am curious to find out if you guys like this. So let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it. So I wanted to make the second half of this video kind of just a commentary on reboots and revivals in general, because I feel like things truly, for the first time, are starting to genuinely get out of hand. And this movie is basically one of my main reasons for thinking this way. So don't worry, this is still on topic. I'm just not going to be reviewing the movie anymore, and instead we will talk about some of the events that occurred prior that led to the movie existing, and what's next for Nickelodeon, Viacom, and really just the entertainment world in general when it comes to these reboots and revivals. Because like I said, it's starting to get out of hand. First things first, I see a lot of people asking why they chose to bring back Zoey 101 over all the other Nickelodeon shows they could have chosen. And the answer, when you really look into it and crunch the numbers, is because they really just had no other realistic option. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say this because there are so many successful and iconic Nickelodeon sitcoms that they could have done, but like, is there? When networks like Nickelodeon go back in time to see which shows from the past they can bring back into the present times, they almost rarely ever look at story quality first. That's why the shows that you see being brought back to life nowadays are always, with very few exceptions, the ones that were at least pretty successful during their original run. So this begs the question, why did Nickelodeon bring back Zoey 101? Because Zoey 101 was the only popular show left that they could realistically do a revival on. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at all of our other options. First, we got Clarissa Explains It All, a show that I actually really enjoy, at least from the little I've seen of it. A revival series was actually in the works, but plans fell apart due to whatever reasons. For those unaware, this show was actually pretty big in the 90s. It was basically Nick's first hit sitcom, and there's probably plenty of 90s kids who would like to see this show brought back. The only issue is, the people that grew up with Clarissa Explains It All are probably eligible for an AARP membership within the next 5 to 7 years. I think they have much more things to worry about than what Clarissa and Sam and Ferguson are up to in the year 2023. I don't see it happening anymore. I don't think the demand is very high, and Paramount Plus / Nickelodeon are likely not putting money into it. Next, we got The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Again, a really good show, but when was the last time you saw someone talk about it? For me, it was actually 2017, but that's besides the point. Next, we got All That. Already did come back. Then there's My Brother and Me, Space Cases, and The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo. Have you heard of any of these shows? I actually have. Nobody cares about them though. Kenan and Kel is an interesting one because once upon a time, I'm sure there was a huge demand to have the show come back, but like, we've seen Kenan and Kel reunite quite a lot within the past 5 years. There was that time on Jimmy Fallon, then there was that time on the All That reboot, then there was that time on SNL, and that time during the Emmys, then there was the other time on Jimmy Fallon, and now they're doing Good Burger too. Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell are back. They just aren't playing Kenan Rockmore and Kel Kimball because, being real here, the Kenan and Kel TV show universe is not that interesting outside of the two characters, Kenan and Kel. I don't really care what Roger is up to or Kyla. If you want to see Kenan and Kel in 2023, then watch Good Burger 2 because they literally played the exact same characters, just with different names. Next, we have Cousin Skeeter. Then we have the Brothers Garcia, which for whatever reason already did come back, and I have no idea why. Due to licensing stuff, it wasn't even on Nick though, it was on HBO Max, and then it got canceled after one season because I guess they realized nobody actually cares about the Brothers Garcia, respectfully of course. Then we got the Romeo Show. Lil Romeo thinks it's happening. He also thinks that the show's ratings were on par with SpongeBob back in the day. Can someone please check on Lil Romeo? And then finally, we get to a really interesting show, Drake and Josh. Now, some of you may not know this, but yes, we were in fact going to get a Drake and Josh revival project. Someone took a photo of Drake and Josh standing outside the Viacom building after a business meeting. It was even confirmed a little later. Then Drake Bell happened, and now Nickelodeon can't even advertise that Drake was ever in Drake and Josh anymore. Anytime they've mentioned the series on their social medias the past few years, they only ever include Josh Peck and maybe Miranda Cosgrove. So yes, we were supposed to get one, and we probably would have gotten it a year or two ago, but now after Drake did what he did, we're never ever getting it. Josh's career is doing fine without it though. Most recently he was in Oppenheimer, and Drake will likely never be invited to be on a kids network ever again, and that's a good thing. The biggest show though that I've seen people talk about in regards to a potential revival series is Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, one of my all-time favorites. I've seen a lot of people question why aren't we getting adult survival guide. I for one think it would be a great idea. I'd love to watch it. So why didn't Nickelodeon put money into it, even though apparently the pitch for it was great? For the same reason why Disney isn't putting money into a Phil of the Future reboot, or why Cartoon Network isn't putting money into a Camp Lazlo reboot. As much as it pains me to say this, because this show is literally my third favorite Nick sitcom behind Drake and Josh and Kenan and Kel, Ned's Declassified, to a lot of people, was a filler show. Now you might be wondering what I mean by that, so let me break it down. Every kids network has 3 tiers of shows when it comes to popularity. You got your heavy hitters, the ones that get the most plays, the most advertising, and the most attention because they make the most money. And oftentimes, but not all the time, they generally are the best shows. Not all the time though. And then you have that middle tier, which is what I like to call the filler shows. The shows that fill up the time slots while the heavy hitters aren't airing. These are generally shows that some people probably really liked, but most people kind of viewed them as shows to watch while they were awaiting their favorite show to come on. And you don't need to tell me in the comments that you like Ned's more than Drake and Josh or Zoey 101. That's fine. I get it. But the ratings are all the proof that you need. And I've even heard Devin Werkheiser himself say that he always felt like Ned's was smaller in comparison to the Dan Schneider shows. I would take Ned's over Zoey 101 every day of the week and twice on Wednesdays. But it's pretty evident that I'm in the minority when I say that. Now, again, a revival series was pitched to Viacom a couple years back by creator Scott Fellows and the 3 main leads, and obviously it was never picked up. However, the cast did end up reuniting for a podcast where they go back and watch the series and talk about each episode. For like the first 10 minutes at least, then they switch to a completely different topic. But you get the point. I've listened to a bunch of episodes. For the most part, it's a good listen, and they even had Hutch Dano from Zeke and Luther on the podcast. The only issue that I have is that more than half of the podcast marketing so far has just been them complaining about shows like iCarly and Zoey 101, shows that were just far more popular and successful than Ned's coming back before them. I genuinely really like the cast members from Ned's, and I get the frustration because their idea was probably much better than at least the Zoey 101 movie. But like the frequency of these TikToks and Reels is just becoming a bit sad.
Then why is Nickelodeon not doing a reboot of You but Zoey 101?
I don't know.
You don't know? Tevin, the series finale of Zoey 101 was the most watched episode of any Nickelodeon live action series ever. It had 7.3 million views, and it even beat out American Idol that night. The only other live-action Nickelodeon series to have an episode premiere with such a large audience was the iCarly and Victorious crossover movie, which also had 7.3 million views. When the series premiered, it was their best debut episode viewership-wise in 8 years. Now granted, a lot of that had to do with who Jamie Lynn's sister was, but still, this show was huge. The entire series averaged 3.5 million views an episode and was comfortably beating every other TV show in its demographic until Hannah Montana came along and offered up some competition. And even then, they were basically neck and neck. You want to know the viewership numbers for Declassified? The premiere didn't even crack 1 million. And you might be saying, oh, well, it was a new show, it didn't find its footing yet. Unfabulous premiered that same night, right after Ned's, and gained 1.3 million views. So I mean, what else is there left to say? The reason why Ned's Declassified isn't coming back is because it was just not that popular. And like I said, networks always look at popularity first. If a show didn't work the first time, why would they put money into it a second time? I'm not saying that's the right mindset to have, but that's the mindset that they do have. Imagine 10 years from now, Austin and Ally gets a revival movie, and the cast of Dog with a Blog starts complaining that they should have gotten one first. That's what this is like, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, but these guys just need to let it go. So yeah, you can scratch Ned's off the list. Obviously, iCarly already received the revival series and is doing very well on Paramount+. Big Time Rush already are back technically because they've been touring and releasing music again for the past year or so. They even sold out Madison Square Garden, which is pretty cool. I don't think they want to come back for a new series or movie since they've been putting all their time and efforts into their music, but hey, you never know. I won't rule it out, but I know a couple of the band members aren't too interested in that idea right now. Victorious is another one I see people bring up, but like, good luck getting Ariana Grande back. Additionally, it really does seem like everyone has kind of moved on from the show. Like Leon Thomas is making a lot of money working for artists like Drake and Ariana Grande, so I guess none of them are criminals for now, so it's not impossible, but it's just not something I see happening anytime soon. Then there's the Naked Brothers Band. Not even going to comment on that one. The Troop, Super Ninjas, Buckin' and Skinner, you get the point. Now, the one show I actually think could make a good revival series, and they might actually consider it, is True Jackson VP. Now, this show actually received pretty decent ratings, and with Keke Palmer absolutely killing it right now, I don't think it's possible. I mean, True working in the fashion industry at such a young age and accomplishing so much could lead to some pretty interesting plot points and a revival. What is she up to now? Does she run Mad Style? Or did she start her own fashion company? Maybe Usher can make an appearance. Hey man, I'm actually kind of curious. The only thing is, you can't really make it like the iCarly revival series, where you can have a bunch of people from the OG show appear in it. Like yeah, you could have her two friends and maybe even Robbie and Mel, but I don't think anyone really cares about the other True Jackson VP characters. Like you can't just have like Ron Butler show up and expect the audience to start cheering like, yeah, Ron Butler, woohoo! I love the way you caught an apple in the theme song. I don't even think we saw my guy's legs in the show. I think he was really just behind the desk the whole time. But yeah, you guys get my point. When it comes to nostalgic shows, they chose Zoey 101 because they probably thought, oh, well, this is one show that people loved back in the day, and the cast is still available. Let's try to do it again, and let's see if we can recapture that same magic. They were desperate because they didn't have much left, which is what leads me into my next big point. You see, back in the day when a show would come back, it generally was something that was off the air for decades, like Fuller House. Then things started to change when Raven's Home came out, but it was still a good 10 years after the original show ended. But now things are getting kind of ridiculous. Nickelodeon has gotten so desperate that they are now making movies based on The Thundermans, which ended only 5 years ago, and Henry Danger, which technically, if you include Danger Force, never actually ended. Nick knows that they barely have any old shows left that they can bring back, So they've now pivoted to bringing back new shows that in my head only ended like yesterday. Let's say you were like 11 when the Thundermans ended, right? By the time the revival movie comes out, you'll probably be barely old enough to drive. You're more or less still a kid. How many 16-year-olds are going to download Paramount Plus, make an account just to watch the Thundermans return? Who is this movie even for? Y'all only just recently stopped airing the show. You barely gave anyone enough time to miss it. And I'm not even going to comment on Henry Danger coming back, alright? That's a whole different situation. The point I'm trying to make is that the reboot and revival world is starting to get ridiculous. Everything is coming back, regardless of if you can make a good story from it or not. Zoey 101 being an example of this. Nickelodeon wanted to make a quick buck, so they greenlit this. The iCarly revival actually seems like some thought was put into it, and now people are actually enjoying it, even with the absence of Sam. That's impressive. But movies like Zoey 102 are the definition of a soulless cash grab. I don't hate the idea of revivals and reboots, but to me, it should only be applied to shows that either 1, never got the chance to have real finales, or 2, genuinely have good stories left to tell. I would love for them to bring back Jimmy Neutron, as long as most of the original staff members came back, because that show got canceled for reasons beyond their control. At the same time, Nickelodeon, please stop making Fairly OddParents reboots. It's a dead franchise. Leave it be. At the same time, I think a Ben 10 live action movie with a real budget and talented writers would be sick. At the same time, we don't need a reboot of the Aristocats. I actually used to like the Aristocats when I was a kid. Who cares about the Aristocats so much that they would want to see a hyper-realistic animated version of them? I refuse to call it live action because it's not, just like how Lion King was in live action. I was never into camp that we need to just stop bringing back old stuff. Sometimes I even welcome the idea. It's all about choosing the right shows/movies. But I'm getting nervous, man. I'm getting nervous. I don't like the way the entertainment industry is headed. In more ways than one, am I right? But that's a different topic. I'm scared that one day, maybe 8 years from now, someone is going to walk up to Nickelodeon and pitch a great, game-changing, revolutionary idea that kids will love, that'll get shot down in favor for a That Girl Lele revival series. And when that happens, we're doomed. I don't have anything else much to add. I'm Mr. Nostalgia, and I'm out for now. Peace.